Hey guys, Steve here from Blossom Racing. Gonna shoot a video for you today about 42 millimeter carburetors. We are going to talk about tuning a 42 millimeter carb. This carburetor has not been modified yet, so it is technically a gas carburetor. It's got the stock pilots, main jets, tubes, everything in it. So I'm just going to use this as reference, and we're going to go through it and talk about how to tune this carburetor. So usually when I talk to people about tuning a carburetor, I usually talk to them about head temperatures. The reason why I do head temperatures is it's a lot more accurate to me. The head temp sensor on motors is basically in the same spot as every motor. It's underneath the spark plug. The only differences that you have is maybe the type of aluminum head that you have, the thickness, that can come into play. Where some people use the EGT sensor. Problem with that is the technical measurement that you would need would be from the center of the valve to where your sensor is placed. Lots of motors, you'll see people putting them an inch and a half, 2 inches away from the motor, but technically what's the distance from that sensor to the center of the valve? That would be a much more accurate measurement. So if mine's an inch from the motor and yours is an inch from the motor, but I'm an inch and a half from the center of the valve and you're 3 inches from the center of the valve, well, your EGT temperatures are going to be completely different than what mine are. So for purpose of this video, all the temperatures that I'm going to be talking are going to be head temp. Okay, so we'll start off there. So let's break this carburetor down. So I usually tell people that you have to treat this carburetor like two different people. So the first person is the low idle circuit, and the second person is the high-end, full throttle, wide open circuit. So I tell everybody that the first thing that you need to do is to set up your idle circuit. And how you do that is you base it all off of head temp. So most motors need to leave at the starting line anywhere from, let's say, 135, 140 degrees on the head temp to about 200 degrees on the head temp. I give you that big of a swing because some motors like 140, some motors like 160, and some motors like 180, some motors like 200 at the starting line. So the first thing you have to do is figure out what your motor reacts to better. That would be the first place to start. So let's get into just talking about setting up the idle circuit. So basically, the items on this carburetor that affect your idle circuit is on the outside, right here, you have an air mixture screw. This affects your idle circuit, your temperature. This is a minor adjustment. So if you need more than 10 degrees or, you need to bring the head temperature up or lower it significantly, this one is not for you. But this one is kind of like a tedious adjustment. And this is the air mixture screw. So what you're regulating with this is air. So the farther you screw it out, the more air you let into the carburetor, the less fuel that's going to get in. So that means it's going to lean the carburetor out on the idle circuit and it's going to heat up quicker. So me personally, I use this screw to work on my head temperature as I'm rolling up to the starting line. If I'm racing somebody that's really quick on their program and they get up to the starting line, and since I don't do any burnouts, I can't raise my head temperature very quick. So if they shoot up to the line and they're ready to go, I'm screwing this out a half a turn to bring my temperature up to 140. I'm going to use 140 because that's usually about what my cars leave at. So that's one way of getting my temperature at the starting line up quicker. If I got somebody that is a little bit slower program, you know, they do burnouts, they do dry hops, pushbacks, you know, they run through their program. If I run up against somebody like that, you may find me screwing this in to try and lower my temperature or to slow down my head temperature. Another way of doing that is I'll lower my RPMs on my car. And when you lower the RPMs, of course, it's going to produce less friction, less heat. You're getting more fuel in there, and it's going to start bringing my head temperature down. So if I got somebody that's slow and I don't want to build heat fast, that's what I'll do to get to the same temperature. And the reason why your head temperature is so important, that is where the majority of your consistency comes from. If you go to the starting line, excuse me, at 100 degrees one pass, and the next pass you go up at 160 degrees, and then the next pass you're back at 120, I guarantee you I want to race you because your car is going to be horribly inconsistent with that huge head temp swing. So the number one place for consistency is going to the exact same head temperature at the starting line every single time. Okay? All right, these carburetors on the 42s, they have a plug right here. These carburetors are considered non-bleed carburetors, so actually that port on the very bottom does not work. This port right here is your air mixture screw port, so that functions. This one, the only one that you can make this one, you can actually make this one function, and this runs the main circuit, the emulsion tube or the needle tube. If you pull that emulsion tube out the needle tube and you put crosshatch holes in it, just holes all the way up the tube, then this will function. Then you can put, you know, air jets in here. The one that's in here right now is a plug. You can put air jets in here that will help your main circuit as far as letting air in. Okay, so that's how you make that function is by that. Accelerator pump on this. There's two things to take accelerator pump out, which there's a little screw right here with a spring on it. If you screw that in, that is going to limit how much the accelerator pump works. There is also a screw right here on top, which if you screw that down, it is going to stop this white piece, which pushes down your accelerator pump. So that will also limit your accelerator pump. Mainly affects your starting line, like right when you hit your pedal, full throttle, this is going to engage and then you're going to get a quick shot of fuel. Depending on where your tune is, if your tune is set up really fat and all of a sudden you got that shot coming in, it could cause a stumble because now you have too much fuel. And then vice versa, the exact opposite, you know, could work to where if your carburetor set up really lean and you hit the throttle and then you got that fuel shooting in there, you know, that could work out perfect for you. So it all depends on how your carburetor is set up as far as how much you want this accelerator pump to work or not. Typically with these accelerator pumps, the plunger and the spring down in the bowl here gets plugged up, it gets corroded, and then it doesn't even work. So now my camera's going screwy on me. Come on, camera. Okay, there we go. Got it back. So yeah, so that's kind of the accelerator pump. So that's an item that you may want to check out and make sure is working. So outside of the carburetor, this right here is your stock flex cord. This is how the carburetor comes right from the dealer. This flex cord Don't ever take it out. If you take it out, you have to plug this hole, because if you don't, then you just created an air leak. Another spot for an air leak would be this little black boot right here. These boots get little rips in them. And then when it gets a rip in it, you got an air leak. So you can take this black piece off, tap the little nipple that sticks out of this, and put a set screw in it. You got this little 90-degree vent tube that comes off. We'll usually tap this hole and put a set screw in it. So these ports are just basically for like a Harley motorcycle, for all their pulse lines and signals that go to the engine. So that's what those are. But back to the flex cord real quick. Typically how I set the flex cord up is I'll start the car up, I'll screw it all the way in until I get the RPMs up to like 3,500 RPMs. And then usually I never touch this again. And then I'll go to, and this doesn't have it on it yet, obviously, but then I'll go up to the top adjustment and crank up here to get up to my 4,000 RPMs. If your arm right here ever breaks off, because the aluminum is really thin right in here, sometimes these will break off. If that breaks off and you have your flex cord set at 1,000 RPMs, your car's going to quit running. But if you have this set at 3,500 and this breaks off, you can reach down and grab this and crank it back up to 4,000 RPM and save your pass. Just an FYI there. So let's dive into the carburetor. We'll take the bowl out, and I'm going to talk about the main jet, the pilot jets, how to tune it, how to adjust it, and where to go from there. So let's zip these out real quick. All right, so let's talk about the bowl real quick. You got this long black line that comes off. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do with this. So this is just basically an overflow. And if you look inside the bowl, you have this brass piece that sticks way up. That is directly connected to this black hose. So that is your overflow. So when your fuel gets up here, it'll just run down into there and drip out the black hose. So typically I'll take this black hose and I wrap it up and around my intake manifold just to get it up higher than the carburetor. That way it doesn't leak. Another thing that you can do is put this in a vise and clamp down on this and pinch the very tip of it closed. That way when the fuel's in here vibrating and sloshing around, it won't go into the tube and out onto the ground. So here's your accelerator pump. If you look at it real quick, I'll show you how it works. You got a spring. One end it has like a female slot, and on the top end it has a male slot. So how you install it is the spring goes into the bottom, into the female spot, the recess part, and then it just drops right into the bowl just like that. So the part that's protruding, the male end, is sticking up and out. That's basically how you put one of those in. Okay, so looking at the carburetor, pretty simple. You got your main jet right here, and your pilot jet is right there. The pilot jet is your idle circuit. The main jet is your top end full throttle circuit. So if, depending on what you need to do to your motor, again, we're going all off head temp. So let's say I start my car up, and if you ever wanted to test it at home, when you start your car, it takes about 2 to 2.5 minutes from the second you start the car. Of course, this is going to depend on your track and how they run their program. But our track, when I start my car, it takes me about 2 to 2.5 minutes before I am staged. So if I'm at home and I fire my car up and I turn my timer on and I time 2.5 minutes, I'm checking to see what my head temperature gets to. So let's just say I want to do that 140 degrees. But at home, I fire the car up and I'm only getting up to 100 degrees. So how do I lean out my carburetor to on the idle circuit? How do I lean out my carburetor on the idle circuit to get my head temp to come up quicker? So that is going to be your little pilot jet right here. This pilot jet is regulating fuel. So obviously the bigger the jet, the bigger the number, the more fuel that's going to come in, the cooler the head temperature is going to be. Just opposite if you go smaller. So if I'm only getting 100, 120 degrees, I'm going to take my pilot jet and I'm going to go to a smaller number. So let's say I'm at a 59 right now. I'm going to drop down to a 55 or a 52, and that's going to cause my head temperature to rise quicker. Okay? The emulsion tube and the main jet comes into play on your idle circuit a little bit. And the reason why it does is because we're idling these at such a high RPM. We're at 4,000 RPMs. Some cars are at 45, 5,000 RPMs. Well, when you get that high of an RPM, you're pulling your main needle way out of your emulsion tube. So you're actually drawing fuel in through the main circuit. So the main circuit does play a small role on your idle circuit, but I typically don't take that into account when I'm trying to get my head temperature. I normally just stick to the pilot jet, or you can mess around with your air mixture screw a little bit. Remember, this is a minor adjustment. I mean, you can turn this a big turn and you're not going to get a ton. So it's more of a little tedious adjustment that I do on the starting line as I'm heading up to the starting line. Okay, so let's pull that out real quick and just show you the pilot jet. Pilot jet, you got the hole right down through the center. So these pilot jets have marks on them, numbers on them. This one has a 25 on it. That number means nothing. That number is the size of a gas jet, and we need alcohol. So we drill these out to 52 thousandths, 55, 57, 59, or 62 thousandths is typically the size of these pilot jets. Okay? Another thing that comes into play is the actual hole where the pilot jet goes. So if you look down in there, you can look down and see a hole in the bottom of it, and that hole comes out right inside of your tube here. So that hole, you can drill it out and make it bigger, which is going to let more fuel in. Just remember, you're always going to be restricted though by your pilot jet, because the pilot jet's only going to let so much fuel. But then when it gets to that hole, it'll build up and let more fuel in there. So that hole is a pretty important part of the equation here. So you'll want to put a gauge down in there and see what size that hole is. Typically, the hole down in there is 59 thousandths, at least how we modify carburetors. There's other companies out there that modify carburetors completely different than what we do. They have a bigger hole down there. Biggest we usually go is about 59 thousandths. Okay, so let's take the main jet holder out. There's the main jet holder, and as you see, this is a gas jet. Typically, we'll take that out. I'll drill this holder and tap it for the Holly jets or the Max jets. All right, and then we'll drop the emulsion tube out. Sometimes they don't want to come out. I got a little tap right here. I push the needle up so the needle's not in the way, and then just kind of pull it right out. So if you look at this emulsion tube, there's no holes up and down the side of this at all. So if you wanted to make this functional so it works, you basically take a drill and you drill right there just like that, which is a crosshatch cross drill, and you put a couple of them in it. That way, when you do that, then your air jet on the back side of the carburetor would function with this, which would give you another way to tune a carburetor on your main circuit. So you could just take the air jet out and go up and down depending on what you needed to do with your head temp. So okay, so now we got the pilot jet. Our air mixture screw is all set, and my timer for 2 minutes is set, 2.5 minutes. I fire the car up. Now I'm getting to 140 degrees, no problem. I have the air mixture screw, which that's going to help me at the starting line again. If my neighbor is slow or if he's quick getting up to the line, I can adjust this a little bit to match what he's doing. And then at the end of the day, I always take this air mixture screw and I turn it all the way back in and I turn it out 3/4 of a turn. And that's always my starting point at every race day. And then I mess with it all through the day. And sometimes I'll end up at 1.5 turns out, 1/4 of a turn out. But then again, at the end of the day, when I'm all done racing, I set it back to 3/4 so I start fresh the next day. That way you don't get this out a bunch of turns and then it falls out and then you're really screwed. So I always reset that at the end of the day. Okay, so let's talk about head temperature again after the starting line. So now I'm getting to temperature at the starting line. I'm hitting 140 degrees. I'm perfect. Light comes down, driver takes off, runs down. I go back and look at my graph. And what I'm going to look for is I'm going to look at max head temperature. If your driver goes down and gets off the gas pedal at the finish line, your max head temperature should come in relatively close to the finish line. If they're driving to the 1/4 mile, then you're not going to get an accurate reading. But if they at least get off the gas and then just kind of put it down, hit the gas a couple times as they're going down track. But if they get off the gas at the finish line, typically your max head temperature is going to come right at the finish line or relatively close to the finish line. So what that means is that I can look at my max temperature and that's going to tell me where I'm at the finish line. And why is that number important? Because that number is what's going to get me into the ballpark of having my carburetor tuned correctly. What I mean by that is if I am at the starting line at 140 degrees, typically if you add 100 to about 130, 140 degrees to your starting line temperature, that is what you should be at the finish line. So again, we're going to use the 140. So if I'm 140 at the starting line, my finish line temperature should be 240, 250, 260, 270, 280, right in that ballpark. If you're in there, then your carburetor is set up extremely close to where you want to be. Then after that, you can do tiny little adjustments. Okay. So now let's talk about how we get there. So let's just say that I'm 140 degrees at the starting line. I take off and I'm 350 degrees at the finish line. So that means that I'm way outside of that ballpark that I was talking about, and you are on the lean side. You're not putting enough fuel in that motor. Excuse me. you're not putting enough fuel in that motor to keep it cool, so it doesn't gain so much heat. So let's just say I have 100 uh, jet in there, right? And the max jet, I got 100 in there, or an 89 Holly jet. So an 89 Holly is about a 101 max jet. So let's say I have 100 max jet in there. So what it's telling me is that my main circuit, because my idle circuit's good because I'm getting to the line at the correct temperature that I want to get to every time. But now my finish line temperature is just what I want to adjust. So now I'm going to raise that max jet up to, let's say, a 106, a 110, to attempt to bring down my finish line temperature. So let's say I go to a 110, and now I have 140 at the starting line, and I'm 260 at the finish line. Perfect. I am in the ballpark. And from there, now I can do little tweaks here and there to actually figure out what my car really wants to have, okay? And let's just run that the other way real quick. I'm 140 at the starting line, finish line, I'm only hitting 100 degrees. So now I got to adjust my main jet down. So let's say I'm a 110 max jet, and I'm only getting 200 degrees at the finish line. I'm going to bring my max jet down to a 100 or a 101 or a 102, which is going to lean out my main circuit, and now my temperature is going to rise. So what all this boils down to too as well is, if you have a stumble at the starting line, anything like that, you can take your head temperature and look at your starting line temp. Let's say it's 140, and then look at your finish line temp, and let's say it's 220. Okay, that's going to tell me that my idle circuit is a little fat. So my kid goes up there, nails the gas, the car goes ba-ba, and then takes off. Well, now I go back to the pits and I look at my temperatures, and that's what I come up with is 140 at the start and 220 at the finish. So that's telling me I'm a little fat. So I'm going to take my main circuit, my main jet, and lean that out a little bit, and that should help clean up that stumble that I have at the starting line. There's a lot more things that come into play. Your accelerator pump, the temperature is a big thing. So there are other things that come into play. Your coil, your flywheel. If you are messing around with your carburetor like crazy, jetting up, jetting down, you have a horrible stumble, a miss, a spit, a sputter, and everything you do to the carburetor doesn't change it. It still has a stumble, still has a problem. You're going to want to start looking at your spark plug, your coil, and your flywheel. So the two things that make a flywheel go bad is heat and vibration. Well, these motors have a lot of heat and a lot of vibration. So over time, your magnets get weak, and it'll cause a misfire. It won't fire one time, and so that's when you get that stumble, that spit, that sputter. Sometimes it happens right at the starting line, then it runs the rest of the track good. Sometimes it'll run the whole track going ba 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 all the way down the track. Same thing with coil. When a coil goes bad, basically what happens is you just get a weaker signal. The signal gets weak, and sometimes when it fires, it does the job enough to get it to fire. And then the next pass, it'll miss, it'll spit, it'll sputter, because it just the strength of that spark just decreased enough. And so if you mess around with this carburetor and you're not changing anything, not fixing anything, nothing is happening, seriously look at your spark plug, your coil, and your flywheel. If any of my cars ever miss, spit, or sputter, the very first thing that I do is replace my spark plug, because the porcelain on there will get a crack in it, and when you get that crack, you'll get a misfire. You know, sneak through that crack and you'll have a misfire every once in a while. So whenever I have a car that's been running perfect, no misses, no spit sputters, and then all of a sudden one pass, boom, it spits out right at the starting line. I go back to the pits, pull the plug, put a new plug in, and give that a try. You know, if it becomes something more than that, and you go through the carburetor and can't find nothing there, start looking at your coil, your flywheel. So hopefully this video clears up the mud a little bit. Tuning these carburetors it's really not that tricky once you figure out a basis, and the base is your head temp. At least with us, that's how we um, tune our carburetors, is completely off of head temp. Other people will um, say you have to do it by exhaust temp. Um, I don't even put exhaust temp sensors in my cars anymore. I used to back in the day, just because I wanted to compare my head temp and my exhaust temp. But now I really don't care about the exhaust temp, so I don't even run it. But if I got an 8-cylinder, big block engine, small block engine, whatever, I'm tuning that baby all off of exhaust temp. These motors, you know, single cylinder, 2 valves, um, I go completely off head temp. Um, that seems to be for us where it is. So hopefully I touched everything here on tuning these carburetors. On the needle, the main needle, it has 5 slots on the other end of the needle, um, where you can raise or lower this. So if you take the C-clip off and move it closer to the tip, you're essentially raising the needle up out of the emulsion tube, which is going to allow more fuel in. And then just remember, because of where we are idling at 4,000, 4,500 RPM, you're going to let more fuel in on the idle circuit as well. So if you go adjusting this needle, we usually leave it stock where it is and then adjust the rest of the carburetor to it. It's usually in the middle slot, on the slots on the other end. That's typically where we leave it at. But if you go adjusting that, you just got to remember, if you raise that up, now you're going to fatten up your idle circuit and your main circuit. You're actually fattening both of them up. So if you do that, then you may have to readjust your idle circuit a little bit to counteract all that fuel that you're going to be letting in. So just another thing that you might want to keep an eye on is that a lot of things with this too, this needle, see how it's exposed out here? A lot of times when people are taking this apart, they'll hit this and that little tip gets bent, or that needle gets bent, and that really plays havoc on your car. So make sure you keep an eye on that. Every once in a while, you know, you can take these out, kind of roll it around in your finger and just make sure that it's not bent. They're really easy to take out. You just take the top out, and then look down in there. There's a little Allen head with a little clip with a hook like this that just turns like that, and it hooks over top of the needle, so it can't come out of the slide. So you basically you know, floor it like that, which exposes the screw, loosen it up, flop that thing out of the way, flip the carburetor upside down. That needle should come falling out. Just remember, there's a needle, there's the C-clip, and then there's a little white bushing on these needles in the 42. So you don't want to lose any of those, okay? So again, hopefully I helped you guys out a little bit. Head temperature, head temperature, head temperature. At least here at Blossom Racing, that's how we help you out. So if you ever have carb questions, tuning questions, those are the numbers that we're really going to ask you about. Is what is your head temperature at the starting line, and what is your head temperature at the finish line? I don't think I'll ever ask for exhaust temperature. I can't think of a time that I've ever asked for that. So just when you call us, give a shout out to the head temp. Keep track of those numbers, and we can help tune your carburetor. If not, hopefully this video helps you out on how to tune a carburetor. So just remember, head temp rise from the starting line. Whatever head temp you are at the starting line, add 100 to 140 degrees at the finish line, and that should get you into the ballpark of where your tune should be. So thanks for joining me here at Blossom Racing. Again, I hope this video helps you guys out. If not, give us a call and we'll do it in person. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great day and take care.